Let's talk about Nigel Farage. We've done a lot of talking about Nigel Farage, so I don't think we should really give up now. And when we're onto a good thing, don't give up. After all, Nigel Farage, I'm not shallow. And the man, the myth, the messianic figure, or if Rupert or Rob Lowe is to be believed, the self important prima donna who refuses to delegate and risks dragging Reform UK into oblivion just months ago. Reform was surging in the polls, terrifying both Labour and the Conservatives. But now a civil war is brewing between five people. It's absurd. Accusations are flying, and the whole thing is looking suspiciously like a far right version of Monty Python's People's Front of Judea. You know, he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy. And last Thursday, Rupert Lowe, I find it so difficult not to call him Rob Lowe. I'm not going to resist my temptation to call him Rob Lowe. I've said I won't resist in the past. I'm now going to carry that out. This Rob Lowe fellow, former Tory donor, ex-football club chairman, now rogue Reform UK MP, unleashed a verbal grenade in the Daily Mail. Not actually that significant, really, in the in a sort of overarching survey. He's not said anything that people didn't already think. But he branded Farage as a self-styled messiah, incapable of relinquishing control. His sin? Well, daring to suggest that reform must transition from an insurgent protest movement to a serious governing force. And the response from the Reform UK HQ was swift, vicious, and almost comically overblown. Accusations of bullying, misogyny, workplace misconduct, and for good measure, threats of physical violence against Reform Chairman Zia Yusuf. Lowe naturally denied everything, calling it a witch hunt and vowing not to go quietly. This isn't just internal party drama, it's a symptom of something deeper. Reform, with its 5 MPs, is already splintering into ideological factions: the populists, the libertarians, the economic nationalists, the outright conspiracists, and the only thing holding it together has been Farage himself and his sort of creepy underbelly of ex-National Front and ex-EDL enforcers. So you look around the Farage empire, it was obvious even in UKIP. You look around and you look for people whose hair is somehow missing, and those are the thugs who are enforcing, and they will do everything to enforce. But I think that Rob Lowe is beyond their reach. And I saw something of this years ago in 2015 or 2016 when I tried to take on Farage, and the thugs were wheeled out. And was I intimidated? Yes, I was. I was very worried about getting a brick through the window. I was there was a lot of nastiness. My family was attacked, and but I bit back, and I bit back by caricaturing the people who were nasty. I'm publicly posting stories. I bit back by getting more publicity, and I was lucky to be supported, for the most part, by the media. And but it was heady, and it was exhausting, and it was in my case about 4 days of relentless attention, um, and and I remember very clearly Humza Yusuf saying, "Shall we do this?" And I said, "Well, yes." He said, "Let's go big, and are you ready for this?" And I thought, well, what can it be? But what I wasn't really quite expecting was the thugs. And those thugs are still there. You've got to remember that Farage's campaign in Thanet was run by somebody who had previously been in that thuggish in those thuggish organisations. The underbelly of Reform UK is the same underbelly as UKIP and as the Brexit Party. It's the underbelly of the EDL, the National Front, and those far right thuggish organisations. As I say, just look for the people without hair, and they're all over the place. And those are the fixers in Farage's machine. And the only way they fix is by the threat of violence and by the threat of one of Farage's first options when faced with a problem is to threaten legal action. Have you noticed? If Farage's internal woes aren't enough, his unyielding loyalty to Donald Trump has become a liability as well. Half the country now believes he's in Trump's pocket. He is Trump's own version of pocket billiards. And worse still, Trump is in Vladimir's pocket. Trump is Vladimir Putin's tool, and Farage is Trump's tool. His tepid response to Trump calling Ukrainian President Zelensky a dictator was met with widespread derision. His tepid and tardy response. Critics noted that while other British leaders quickly denounced Trump's remarks, Farage and his MPs hesitated, waiting to see which way the wind was blowing before making a non-committal statement. I'm not shallow. I'm just waiting. And Labour is exploiting this ruthlessly, knowing full well that the British public overwhelmingly supports Ukraine. Even Reform voters are uneasy with their leaders' flirtation with pro-Russian narratives. And do remember, Trump's tariff war, Trump's ridiculous statements. Trump is heading to a reset of the world order. He is heading towards a major global recession. And the one country that is least prepared for a global recession is, surprise, surprise, Russia. So Russia can't win this. Russia cannot win this, even if it takes 10 years, even if it takes 20 years. Russia should learn from the Taliban. It should learn from, it should look over at America and learn from Vietnam. It should learn from its attacks on Georgia every day. I think we're now into the 100th day of protests in Georgia. And then there's Richard Tice, Reform's deputy leader, who was left squirming when asked on Talk TV whether he'd be fine with giving away parts of Britain if it were invaded. Given his stance that Ukraine should make territorial concessions, his response, it's not us giving it away, it's Ukraine. Not exactly Churchillian, is it? And not exactly fair. Despite Reform's recent polling highs, Labour is now pulling ahead again, with Reform slipping back to 25%. The problem is Nigel Farage, isn't it? Nigel Farage is at present the most unpopular main party leader in Britain. It's okay to be recognised, but you ought to be admired if you're going to be recognised. And Nigel Farage is recognised and pilloried. A YouGov poll last week gave him a net unfavourability rating of -39. He might as well be Prime Minister. But putting him behind Starmer, putting him behind Badenoch, that's an achievement. And even Ed Davey. And let's face it, when you're being outpolled in likability by Ed Davey, you have a serious problem. The enthusiasm of Reform activists is undeniable, but it doesn't change the electoral maths. Their biggest challenge remains the first past the post system, and if Reform wants to be anything more than a noisy protest movement led by somebody who's simply concerned about the depth of water in his swimming pool, I'm not shallow, it needs to be a major electoral pact with the Tories, politically toxic, or a drastic broadening of its appeal, inherently difficult when it keeps alienating moderates with culture war rhetoric and Trumpian theatrics. So, it's isolating itself. Even Farage's billionaire backers appear to be losing face. Elon Musk, recently declared that Farage doesn't have what it takes, and instead threw his weight around behind Rob Lowe. And Rob Lowe himself, or Loki, let's call him Loki, that's a better one, isn't it? Loki. Let's embrace Gen Z jingoism, lingo. Loki himself, sensing an opportunity, is now making noises about leading Reform into the next election. He's been stung, but is he out? Is he out? Well, he could always start his own Reform. Reform 2. A little bit shallower. And you know he'd probably get some sort of votes. He'd probably get some sort of following. Of course, there's a problem between Rob Lowe and Rob Lowe. One of them is pretty, and one of them is charismatic, and the other, yeah. But neither Rob Lowe nor Richard Tice possess Farage's ability to whip up a crowd or to dominate the media. Richard Tice does better than Rob Lowe, frankly. And as Adam Bolton put it, Reform UK is Farage. Without Farage, it's just a disjointed collection of disillusioned right-wingers with little cohesion. Meanwhile, Reform's funding could also be at risk. Prominent donors like Mohammed Amersi have warned that they won't bankroll a divided party heading into an election. Without money, Reform's insurgency risks losing momentum. And with the Tories still flailing in the low 20s, all this could make Labour's path to victory in the next election smoother than is expected. The real question, therefore, is, what is Reform UK? An organisation which is predicated on a name which depends on changing what's already there. Conservative means to keep what's already there. Labour means to work for one particular group. Reform means to change something. And once you've changed it, what's left? It's a movement designed to shake up Westminster. It's a movement that has an end goal in sight. And when that end goal is reached, it's got nothing left to offer. Or it's a vehicle for Nigel Farage's ego. And once it's done that job, it can change its name. Why not just be honest? Why not call it the Farage Party? If it's reform, it needs serious policies. And it needs to think about what it's got, what it does when it gets what it wants. Rather like Brexit. What do you do when you get Brexit? Nobody thought about that. I remember UKIP meetings, and I remember saying, what happens when you get this? Nobody had an answer. Nobody had an answer. And if it's all about Farage, then Reform UK needs to continue to rise and fall on Farage's personal fortunes and health. Great for entertainment, terrible for long-term success. Farage once said of Rob Lowe, of Loki, "I'm sure he wouldn't want this job if you paid him $10 million. Well, not true. And for $10 million, I'm sure he'd have it. And that's the problem. Who actually wants the job of leading a party that functions as a one-man show? Well, nobody, until it becomes a little bit more general. Nigel Farage isn't the Messiah. And if Reform UK can't move beyond Nigel Farage, it will discover that its own moment in the sun, and Farage's moment in the sun, was fleeting. Farage is about to get sunburnt by his own spectacular rise, by his own spectacular ascent. This isn't Farage calling, or this isn't the BBC calling. This is Lucifer falling. The bright spark in the sky. It's like tiger, tiger burning bright. You know, tiger, tiger burning bright. That William Blake poem. It isn't about a big cat in the jungle. It's about Lucifer. It's about Lucifer. How can God make an animal that is pure evil? God takes the stars and turns it into something that is fundamentally bad, fundamentally a monster. That is Satan. Tiger, Tiger Burning Bright could be about the Industrial Revolution, absolutely. It could be about creativity and the dangers of creativity. You don't know when it's going to turn on you. But certainly it's about the rise and fall, the creation of a being that is so magnificent and so bad that it's a monster. How could a good God create a monster? But that monster is Satan, the burning star, the morning star that is falling. And Farage is that falling star, that star that falls from heaven, that tumbles.